Hi. Some of you may be aware that in the world at large nowadays, there's been a lot of talk about shortages of electronic components. And it's a combination of problems that have been caused by the worldwide pandemic, and it's affected things like manufacturing of cars and other products. Here in Tennessee, we have a Volkswagen plant not too far from us, and there's been times that there's been articles in the paper that they talk about how they have to shut down production because they can't get the electronic modules that they need because the chips that go into those modules are unavailable or on back order or have a long-term delivery date, and it holds up production, and they don't want to build cars that are incomplete and have to go put modules in them. So they shut down production for 4 or 5 days or a week until they get the parts in, and then production resumes. What we do here, we're not buying any $200 and $300 FPGAs or fancy sophisticated microprocessors or anything like that. What we buy is a lot of common electronic components, everyday sort of stuff that a good repair shop needs to have on hand. And I don't think the stuff that we're buying is necessarily contributing to the shutdown of the Volkswagen plant at times because they run out of modules because they can't get the parts they need to make them. However, it does affect us because there is a finite amount of manufacturing capabilities for all sorts of electronic parts. And if you look at it from a reasonable point of view, if you're a electronic silicon chip manufacturer, you have a silicon fab where you're making integrated circuits and microprocessors and FPGAs and things like that, you could make parts that cost tens of cents each, or you could make parts that sell for hundreds of dollars a piece. So what do you think they're going to do? If it were me in charge, I'd go for the hundreds of dollars worth of parts because you only have so much capacity and you might as well make as much money out of it as you can. And also, I'm pretty sure that they have long-term contracts with a lot of companies and they have to fulfill those to the best of their ability. But as I said, this does affect us. This is one order that came in for parts that came in yesterday. We've had to increase the quantity of parts that we buy because of the possibility of long-term shortages, even on the most common of parts that we use all the time. Normally, in normal times, if you go back 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there was never really a problem with getting the parts that I prefer to use on the repairs that we do. And like everyone, you get used to having certain items available and you've made hopefully wise choices on what it is you want to use in your repairs. They should be commonly available, and every 2 weeks you make a parts order and it comes in, you replenish what you've used up, and you have extra on hand just in case things get really busy. But it's never really a problem because you know your next order could be as few as 2 days away, so you can always pretty much cover it. That's not really the case much anymore. About a week ago, it was time to make a parts order again because I was running low on stuff, and I sat down at my computer and began to put together an order of the things on my list that I needed, that I know I was short of, and I searched through all of our parts bins to see if I had forgotten anything and made a fairly comprehensive list as I normally do. And I sat down and logged into Mouser because that's where the majority of our parts come from. We have pretty much 2 major suppliers we use. We buy from Mouser and we buy from DigiKey because they are the 2 largest and most reliable and trusted suppliers for electronic components that I know of. And then we have a variety of small specialty suppliers for things that are really hard to get from the old days that you can't get from the big players any longer. I found that a lot of the components that we buy on a regular basis that we need to have on hand for our repairs all the time were either unavailable or on very, very, very long-term back orders. For instance, we'll use this as an example. These are, in fact, I'll open this and show you. These are old school bridge rectifiers. And when I say old school, I'm talking about these little jobs right here. Oops. That one's still good. Oh, okay. Like that. Okay. These are used in IM and IMA 4006s. 2 per set. We do hundreds of sets a year, and they need to be replaced. It's a common part. Not used so much in new products anymore. I don't think there's other forms of that are more popular, smaller size, lower profile, whatever the deal is. And normally when I buy those, I buy 100 at a time because 100 lasts a long time. That's enough to do 50 4006s, and it's never really a problem. When I went online to buy those, I found that the exact ones that I normally order, and like everybody, you reorder the same thing over and over again because you've chosen that one because it's the best suited component for your application. So that's the one you reorder over and over and over again. That particular one, it was out of stock, and it was going to remain out of stock until approximately April of next year. That's a long time. That's over 6 months. That's more like, 9 months, 10 months from now before they expect to have them in stock. And it's like, oh crap, now what are we gonna do? Because I needed them. I was down to my last 6 or 8, and it's not gonna cut it. I need to have more than that. So then what I do is you have to look for a suitable replacement for the replacement. I like to stay with the same brand if I can because I try to choose good name brand components. These are made by a company called Vishay. Vishay is a really good manufacturer for these type of components and resistors. What you do is you try to choose something, you make a lateral move. You don't go up the chain or down the chain, you go sideways in the chain of the products that they make to find something that's suitable. And I found these, and these are just fine. Same thing for lots of these other parts. These are little, what are these? These are little low-powered comparators, and these are little op amps, and these are little quad input logic gates, and these are more quad input gates, and this is a hex inverter, and so on and so on. Normally, each one of these packages contains 100. That one has 50. Why did we buy 50 of those? Oh, because I had a bunch of those still. 50 of those, 100 of those, 100 of those, 100 of those. A lot of these are used in 3003s. 100 of those, 100? Yeah, 100 of those, 100 of those, 100 of those. So most of these have 100 in the package. A normal every 2-week order of these kind of parts, I would order maybe 25. Maybe only 20. It depends on how many I have left, and I adjust the quantity according to price also because you want to try to get the best break that you can. I chose at this time to order 100 of each of these because the quantities that they had on hand were much smaller than usual, and the next delivery date for these also much longer than typical. And I was concerned that with the availability or the lack of availability on a lot of parts, as it trickles down the supply chain, these may at some point become on long-term waits or back orders. It's not uncommon in the world of electronic components for a manufacturer. If a manufacturer is out of stock of a particular component and you need to buy 100,000 of them, it can easily be 5 or 6 months before they have them for you because it takes it that long to get into the chain to be manufactured. So we can't run out of things like this because these are used in 3303s, and if you don't have them, you can't fix the sets. That's what it comes down to. And then there's a logjam of repairs and people get upset and all this other kind of stuff. This package right here, this is a good example also. These are 12-volt linear regulators, LVRs. Normally, I'll have several hundred of these in stock because there are some sets that use 3 and 4 of these, and we always replace all of them. And I prefer this brand. This is ROM. It's a German company. They make really good ones. They're the plastic encased ones, not the ones with the metal tabs, because that's what the sets originally had, and it's the best replacement for it. Normally, when I buy these, I'll buy 200 or 300 at a time, because that way I have plenty. I have a big extra supply on hand and all of that. When I went to look at these, they had exactly 24 in stock, and their next delivery date was only 3 weeks out, which was good. But then the next delivery date after that was like March of next year. So what did I do? I ordered 400 of them. They shipped me the first 24 because that's what they have in stock, and when the balance of the order is available, they'll ship those to me, so things filter in all the time. One of the things that I've learned over the last year and a half or so is when things are unavailable and they're on back order or long-term delivery, you might as well place your order because you know you're going to want them, and get in line to make sure you can get them. If you think you can wait until August of this year and then they're going to have them and then they'll ship them to you right away, you'll probably be wrong, because other people will pre-order, and then when the stock does come in, it'll all be spoken for and you won't get any. Same thing with these. These are battery holders for backup batteries. We don't buy a lot of these. Normally I buy 10 or so at a time. The ones I normally buy from this company are on long-term back order. They won't have them until June of next year. So I bought a similar one that I can make work with what we do. It's not a super critical part. It's a battery holder, so it's pretty easy. But still, all of this filters down and filters down and filters down. Big sacks of capacitors for 3303s. And it even filters down into small parts. Like here, this is a sack of 1 microfarad 50 volt electrolytic capacitors. Normally when I buy these, I normally try to have 100 on reserve in stock and 100 that I'm working out of when I'm doing repairs. And when I use up the 100 that I'm working out of, I order another 100, so I always have 200 roughly in stock. These were in short supply. And this is one of those kind of parts that you absolutely positively have to have because of the value. 1 microfarad at 50 volts, that's what it has to be. You can't have one at 25 volts or one at 35 volts. It's not suitable. It's 1 at 50. You could go up, you could go 1 at 63 volts or higher, but they become larger and it's an issue, and they're more expensive too, so we don't really want to do that. So how many did I buy? I bought 400. Doesn't look like 400, but I assume it is. Because the next delivery date on these, again, it was many, many, many months out. We can't have that. We have to be able to get what we need to do the repairs that we need to do. Like these capacitors, are these the same? These are the same. These are used in 4406s. And it takes 7 of these in every 4406 we make. So normally I buy Panasonic, but lately Panasonic has had a real problem with supplying capacitors. I get the impression maybe that Panasonic is getting out of the capacitor business. They don't want to make them anymore. They are really top-notch quality, but maybe they're changing what they do. So what I did was I ordered, this is a total of 250. No, this is 150 pieces, but I have another 400 pieces on back order, and they'll come in sometime towards I think it was the middle or end of August. And hopefully this will last me long enough. I'm not positive. I do have some of these in reserve. But there's a lot of things like this that it's just become more and more difficult to find. And here's a good example of how things change in the world that you don't want to change. So one of the things that I like to do is, for most of the capacitors we use, I use Intercom brand. They're one of the top 3 capacitor manufacturers in the world. And about a year and a half ago or so, they discontinued an entire series of what are called axial lead capacitors. This is an axial lead capacitor because the leads come out of both ends, like the axle on a car. These are TVX series. There were TVX and TVA. It was always the go-to axial capacitor series that you would buy. These are all axial capacitors also. And these are all used in old school sets. These are used primarily in sets that were made before 1973. So 1973 all the way back to like 1957. They're old school parts. They have unusual values back in those days. For the sake of originality, we don't substitute radial caps. We use the original ones. Nichicon discontinued their entire line of axial capacitors. Why did they do that? Is there a lack of demand for these nowadays where they can't justify producing them anymore? I don't really know, but there's a lot of older equipment in the world that use parts like this. So nowadays you have to source it from other reputable manufacturers, which is what all of these are. But these in particular, this is 6800 microfarad at 50 volts. This is a unique capacitor because they were really almost the only company that made one like this. And it's used in a lot of different kinds of equipment, and specifically for us, these are used in IM5006s. The leads get bent down like this, and it gets mounted into a specific spot on the board that's designed to allow it to fit because this is really big. It's a critical primary part for the set. These were discontinued, and when these were going discontinued, you always get a notice. You get an end of life notice that says, oh, these models are being discontinued, so if you need them, better buy them up now while you can. I bought a whole bunch of these. I think I bought like 30 or 40 of them. And every time that I would find them at Mauser or DigiKey, I would buy up what they had. I hadn't seen any in a long time, and then on this particular order, I noticed that they had them in stock again, not very many. So what did I do? I bought them all up because I need these. I need to have a stockpile of these for the future because we do a lot of 5006 repairs, and if you don't have these, there's only one other company that I know that makes anything close to this. It's a German company. They're 6900, which is a weird value, at 50 volts. They are very slightly longer than these. And it makes putting it in the set a little tricky because you have to really bend the leads around to get them in the holes properly, and you have to insulate them because they're longer, and it's not the best fit. It's better to go with a genuine replacement part if you can find it. So I have a big stockpile of those. When I see them, I buy them. Here's another thing. These little containers here, these are relays, and these relays are used in 4406s, 3303s, and they're also the relays that we use for our little relay rectifier boards for people to put in Wi-Fi door cameras. Normally what I would do on these, maybe 200 on hand, and I would replace them and order usually 100 more at a time, so I always had plenty. In this particular order, I ordered 400 of these. They only had 100 in stock, and then the next ones, again, they're not going to be available until I think it was sometime late August, early September, but that gives me plenty to work with. So the reality nowadays is, while all of this upheaval in the electronic component world has halted productions of cars and other really big, large, expensive consumer products, it does filter down to us little repair shops because we have to plan ahead. All of this all together, plus all the backordered items, was easily 5 times the cost of what I normally would spend on a every 2-week basis for parts that we need. Now, yes, we are stocked up way ahead, but I still have to plan to reorder and replenish and make sure I have what I need and follow it more carefully because I can't run out. I have to fix things. So that's just a little bit of how it works in the repair business when the world goes upside down on you. I hope you found this interesting, and maybe for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.